Hey there, strategic authorpreneurs. I'm Crystal Hunt.
And I'm Michela Mitrani. We're here to help you save time, money, and energy as you level up your writing career.
Welcome to episode 27 of the Strategic Authorpreneur podcast. On today's show, we're talking about reflection and evolution. And this is our halfway through the year podcast. We have officially made it through 6 months worth of weekly recording episodes, which, woohoo, victory dance for us. We're pretty excited about that. And so we're going to do a little reflecting on the last 6 months of doing the podcast and what the process of making this show has changed about us and how it is helping us evolve as authors. We're also going to do a little looking back over our author careers and talk about how we are going to evolve over the next 6 months so that we are setting some intentions, setting some specific goals, and making sure that we are not just creating a cool thing, but moving also towards that next level for both of us in our careers, because just like you, we are on an authorpreneur journey. So we are growing things just like you guys are. Now, before we dig in, you know how important reviews are in the book world, and the power of a personal recommendation can go a long way. So your mission this week is to share this podcast with a friend who you think might enjoy what we have going on here. And also, if you haven't yet done so, if you can leave us a review wherever you're listening to this podcast, we will be eternally grateful. And now, my Italian friend, what have you been up to this past week?
Since this is a moment when we reflect on the past, I also been investing sometimes in reflecting on what's lying ahead for me, entrepreneur-wise. And so I spoke with Crystal a couple of times in our coaching times, and I realized I really, from my 12 by 20 challenge stories, that I really want to write more fantasy. So I'm going to make the focus of the next months to really be a bit more strategic in how to think of releasing my works from this moment on. And in order to do that, this is important because this is the first time I did not present a book as a first thing, but there is a reason why. Since I have made up my mind to release a lot of fantasy books, what I'm going to do now is reading a lot of those. So there are some that I already read and that I would suggest to people that are interested in fantasy. One is Patrick Rothfuss, The Name of the Wind. It's really a really cool book written in a very poetic way. And I'm going to probably reread passage of that because I really find it speaking with me a lot. The other one that I really enjoy is this one I've never suggested before, but I've read it twice. The Eye of the Word is the very first one of the 14-part series of The Wheel of Time by Robert Jordan. So this is another one of my favorites. You can see like how it's basically destroyed the edges because I've read it many times. Then there is another one that I'm almost basically done, and I suggested this already. It's Brandon Sanderson, The Way of Kings, which is another one that I'm really enjoying and is informing a lot the way I think of the fantasy words, and I'm thinking a lot of word building. This one is very useful for that sense. And the last one that today I want to recommend is Red Sister by Mark Lawrence. This one is fairly smaller, and it's been a long time that I wanted to read this author here, and I didn't dip it in him, but reviews are amazing, and I'm honestly very interested in knowing what this author did. And it's another fantasy. It's more on the dark side with respect to the others, but this is basically what I'm doing right now. These are today's recommendation, which is way more than I usually do. But because it's a special episode, I just wanted to give you, special recommendation in quantity too. And what about you, Krista? What is your special things that you're going to share with us today?
Well, I have also been reflecting. It's basically back to school time. So we are the end of August, beginning of September, and I love that back to school kind of feeling. And I think the weather starts to shift a little bit here, and the focus shifts from being outside, summertime. There's sort of a slower pace in the summer, and lots of sunshine and hot, which means my sluggish Irish blood does not care for the heat. So I tend to do a lot better in the fall. So for me, when the summer is coming to an end and things are getting cooler out, fall is my favorite time. And it's also when everything kind of goes crazy in the book world. For me, people are getting back inside, they're reading, there's all the good holidays, we have Thanksgiving and Christmas break and all that stuff. So I have been doing a cleanup of AMS ads and stuff. Actually, I just have re-released my McAllister's series box set with new covers, and have been overhauling all of the keywords and making sure that everything is ready to go, because it's going to be great for Christmas, but it takes a few months to get your AMS ads really ramped up and to get some consistent track record with all of that stuff. And you really want to do that before when you're going to want it. So on the business side of things, I've been doing that while also writing some more of the shorter stories and moving forward with my word production factory for my fall releases, which is great. And then what I'm reading right now is a book called Atomic Habits by James Clear, which I am holding up if you're watching us on YouTube. And I find seasonally my habits really change. So as the weather changes, as my focus changes, it's nice to just dip back into a book that talks all about how you put together habit strings and how you choose what's going in your daily schedule and how you help trick yourself into getting done the things that you want to get done. So I do really like James Clear. He's got an interesting blog and website and all of that stuff. And I also really enjoyed this book in the past. So I've brought it out again to revisit it and just make sure that I am setting myself up for success as we go into the busy season of this year. So that's what I've been up to. Now, we are going to talk about what we've been up to on a longer scale of things. So a bit of reflection of what are we doing with the podcast, and how has that been impacting our author careers and our own author evolution. So let's start maybe with just looking back at, why did you say yes to doing this podcast? What was it that you wanted out of being part of this?
I would say there are 2 or 3 reasons, but I need to be very honest with you. There was, for me, the possibility to work for the first time with a person that I would say had an experience that I really wanted to have. So she was at that point in her career that I wanted to be in the near future. Of course, spoiler alert, that person is Crystal. But that, you can call it, I'm going to call it this way, a selfish reason. But at the same time, it's just because I really wanted to better myself as an author. And I saw that as a great opportunity for me to humbling allow this other person to teach me through her things, but also to our guests, because I've learned so much with every single interviews that we did in the past months with the different writers and authors. There was something that I really learned, and I was focused on that part, on the potential that this podcast could have, not only for the listeners, but also for me, your co-host. It's really, for me, it was a possibility to better myself and at the same time try to help with my mistakes that I made and my experience other people that are at the point that it's more like similar to mine. And at the same time, also, in some way, Crystal, I feel to represent people that try to win this game, the game of the publishing, the self-publishing, but English is not their first language. So in some way, I also feel to be kind of an herald for these people that are maybe struggling a bit more because of this thing. But yes, really, I would say that the reason that made me say yes was because of these possibilities of getting better, and also the chances that I could have to share my experience with other people. And actually, I've never asked you why, because we discussed about this, Crystal, like before. It was a project that you wanted to undergo, maybe by yourself, but then you proposed me, would you be interested in doing this? At the beginning, it was like a sharing of knowledge. You were coaching me on that side. I was telling what I knew about my experience with podcasting, because, small parenthesis, I've been doing podcasting for 3 years before Crystal proposed me this adventure together. And so I've never actually asked you what made you pull so many projects that you have and shut them off and really dedicate yourself 100% to this. What was the reason?
There's a few reasons. One is that I'm a terrible procrastinator if it's just me who's involved in a thing. So I find it very easy to put my commitments to other people before my commitments to myself. And so I had been thinking about doing a podcast for 3 years, I think. It had been something that was on my radar. I wasn't 100% sure where to start, which, was part of our original conversation around working together, because I like working with somebody who knows what they're doing. That's very handy. And I did want just a way to kind of package and share some of the knowledge that I had been doing one-on-one coaching with a lot of people, and just finding myself answering the same questions over and over and over and over again. And so I thought it would be a lot more efficient to kind of package that up in a way that anybody who wanted it could access it without needing access to me personally on a one-on-one kind of basis. So I thought that was a great idea, and that it would be also, from a selfish perspective, great promotion for the Creative Academy guides for writers and the books that I've written in that series as well, because a lot of what we talk about is the stuff that I'm excited about, which is the same things I write those books about as well. So there was that. But why you? So there's a couple reasons why it was Michele that I wanted to work with. And one of them was because I think there is a huge value in having a different perspective on things. And so for me, I've been fully immersed in the romance world for several years, which is interesting, but very different than the experience in other genres. And so I really wanted to have that co-host experience so that I would be accountable, but somebody who's going to bring a different point of view to it. And you're also a different generation. I am a decade older, so there's a certain amount of age difference there. And also, I think the gender difference is an interesting difference in perspective and energy as well that we bring to it. So I think those are all the sort of ways that we're different, but I think even more important are the ways that we are the same, which was that I think we both come at things from a respectful point of view to the world at large, and that we both have a focus on just sharing what we can and being very honest and open about what that looks like. And so that sense of humor and the ability to do what we're doing over the next 4 episodes, which is like, here's how we screwed this up and here's how you can avoid that. I think not everybody is willing to be transparent about the process and to be honest about what kinds of things they're going through. And so that to me was a really good opportunity just to blend all of that together in a way that would be interesting. And I think having someone who asks you questions you wouldn't necessarily think to ask yourself, it draws information out of you that you wouldn't necessarily think to share with other people. So when it comes to the author journey, I've been in the industry for 15 years now. And when you get really deep in, you forget how much of what you know or say or do has all this lingo. And we use acronyms and we shorten the titles for things and we toss off names of things as though everybody knows what we're talking about. And of course, they don't. So it's really good to have, I think, that balance and that reflecting back at each other from those different points of view along the author journey is really valuable. So, and the most important thing is that it's fun, because I really have no interest in doing anything that isn't fun anymore. So it is very much a privilege to get to the point where you can pick and choose a little bit the projects that you work on and how you're going to spend your time. And this is high up on my list because I look forward to Tuesdays. It's fun to show up, and that's when we do our recording, and to be able to just have a conversation that feels very natural and relaxed and comfortable, and also is a good time to do. So I think all of that is really, it's what I love about it, and also what I was hoping to get out of it when we started was really that. And of course, with guests, the opportunity to call people that you maybe don't have an excuse to call otherwise and say, hey, can we chat for an hour about really cool stuff? And so while we started with a lot of people that I know really well, just in case I screwed anything up because I was learning how to podcast, we also get to branch out now and have guests that we don't necessarily know already, and really give some people a platform to share about their work and the writing industry and the publishing industry. So I'm really excited to do that next bit of evolution with the podcast, and broaden our horizons as far as guests and who we get to talk to, which is very cool. I'm curious for you, like, how do you feel that doing the podcast, do you think it's changed anything about how you are approaching your author journey?
Yeah, absolutely, 100%. I think every experience that you put yourself into is going to change you in a degree. This podcast changed me in many ways. Some of these ways I don't even grasp them now. I think I will have to look back and see, okay, so the way I was approaching that problem, or I was focusing on that subject, actually was influenced or was informed by the way I spoke with Crystal about that episode, that date, on that moment, or when I listened to that conversation with one of our guests. So there are some things that I can't give you an answer because I don't know yet. I think it's going to happen in the future when my body and my mind wraps I wrap my hand around that idea, but for sure there are some things that I can tell you, that I can feel, that changed. I feel myself to be more of a person that is in control of his business. I'm thinking of my books like assets more than pieces of art. That's not necessarily to say that it's something bad, but there is a book that we have. I think we have mentioned that book ad nauseum, like so many times that really it's almost weird. But when Stephen Pressfield say in the War of Art, that really it's a question of you believing that you can do the shift from an amateur to a professional. I think this podcast did that to me to a degree, and I would like to share with you this experience because I do believe the way I'm making podcasts and I'm keeping myself accountable, but of course also Crystal accountable. It's a way for me to see this whole thing of the entrepreneurship as something real, as something as sturdy as the ground that I'm walking on. It's something achievable. It's not an idea in the clouds. And there are so many people that are doing this for a living, but it's not about the money again. It's about the belief that you can really make it with your stories. You can live by making up characters that lives only in your head. And that's amazing. We really compare this experience to magic. And at Crystal, I do believe this to be magic. And I think the podcast, The Strategic Entrepreneur, enabled me to really see this as a business. And of course, I can't say this or spell this without mentioning your name. Like you made possible for me to see that there was something beyond the horizon and not just a very far away line that I can even see if I can get there or not. So I think the word that I'm looking for here is empowering. The podcast has empowered me to see this as something not far-fetched, but something that I can believe, not in the cheesy way, strategically. I can get this done and I can really make this work. So I think that's the best thing that I can think of what this podcast has done for me, shifting completely my view and help me, hopefully, with some of the blathering that I'm doing now, enabling me to help you in your own way. And I do know that it did something to you, not only on the accountability side. Uh, and I want, if you can, you to share a bit more on that regard. We have been talking a lot about being more forthcoming and being very genuine with ourselves. A couple of times we shared pretty deep stories about ourselves, like when there was the monster jars questions. That's one of the reasons I'm telling you that, because that's one of the reasons we are talking about us, and we are letting people seeing us through us, inside us. So I would like you to elaborate a bit more on the way this podcast changed you that is not related to accountability.
Take away the easy answer. That's what co-hosts are for. It's challenging us, get outside our comfort zone. Yeah, there's a couple very distinct and different ways that it's been really helpful, I think, for me. So one of them is just around getting more comfortable about sharing the personal stories and the sort of the journey. I think it's easy to forget once you get to the point where things are building up some momentum, and you get put in this slot as a teacher or somebody who knows what they're talking about, and then you sort of forget about a lot of the stages along the journey, and there is a certain pressure to just always know what's going on and how things work. And so it is really valuable to have, like, I love the curious jar questions because those are so random and we have no idea what's coming, and it does really spark discussion in a way that's deeper than what we would normally have, because I think we ask each other publicly very safe questions, all of us as creators, as people who are very conscious of what it's like to live publicly right now, and that there's a certain risk attached to being real and vulnerable and telling the truth about stuff. And so I think there is a lot of value in that little bit of unexpected connection, and we really do love hearing back from any of you as well about those pieces, because it really is about that connection bit. So I think just that the acceptance that we basically record these live and we put them out. We do a tiny bit of editing if we really screw something up, and then you get the blooper reels at the end. So I think that's a really valuable exercise for us, just in remembering we don't have to be perfect, and our work doesn't have to be perfect, and our writing doesn't have to be perfect. And the only way we're going to get good at anything is by practicing. And so it has been a really important journey of starting it in the middle of a really terrible timing, with the pandemic basically started. We went on lockdown, I think, the week before the podcast started airing. So, it was a really kind of everything shifting and changing time. So to have a bit of stability in the mix was really nice, and something that we can count on, that we show up every week and we do this thing, which has been really good for us. The other way that I think it's really been good for my author career side of things, not just me as a person and my personal development stuff, is in that when I teach something, I can't teach it if I feel like I'm not doing it myself. Then it creates this totally inauthentic, like, just a disconnect. And so by reviewing the steps involved in something and reviewing the best practices, it just prompts me every week. We finish recording the podcast, or when I'm prepping for the podcast, and I'm thinking, oh, I can't hold that up as an example of this thing because, I haven't looked at it in 5 years. Like, I need to refresh this and make sure this is reflecting current best practices, because it's easy as we publish things and put them out in the world and we get all set in our publishing ways, as the cranky old people of the publishing. And so I think it's easy to forget to review, the current stuff, and to go back and apply that to your back catalog, and to make sure that you're not just ignoring your older titles as you're always pushing on to the new things. So it has been a really great exercise that every week when we distill some topic, I use that as a focus for my stuff that I'm going to do in my own book business to make sure that I feel comfortable with my newsletter being an example of what we're supposed to be doing with newsletters, or that my website looks polished and follows the rules of what we say you should be doing. So it is a really good mirror to reflect back on ourselves and make sure that what we are saying is also what we're doing. So that has been a great opportunity to just make sure that everything is getting the attention it needs. And I have seen the results of that, because I had things on pause for most of the last year and just kind of in a maintenance cycle as I was writing new books. And I didn't really focus in as much as I could on tracking the data and paying attention to all those details. So it has been a really good way to just do a bit of a book sales makeover and a refresh on my own stuff as we go as well. So yeah. Okay. So on that vein, in the looking back over time and looking back at our own publishing careers, if you could get in a time machine and you could go back in time, what would you do differently now that you know the things that you know from like a publishing career overall kind of a timeline?
Yeah, I'm going to give you the very short story because you don't want to hear everything. But um, I would say there was a time 3, maybe 4 years ago in which I was spreading my resources thin and wide. I was doing everything except the thing that really counted, because I wasn't asking myself the right question. One of the things that the podcast helped me figure that out, it really did help me figure that out. Because my problem was that I didn't know what to do in order to make my story as successful as possible to reach their audience. So to just give you a simple example, I would probably take that time machine, go back to 4-5 years ago, and not necessarily create a YouTube channel, a blog. I wouldn't say not the podcast, because I've learned a lot, and without the podcast, I'd probably not be here, because Krista wouldn't really need my experience in that. But there are so many things. I'm telling you this because there are so many things that I found to bleed out my time. I don't know if that even makes any sense, but I do believe time is more important than other resources. And for a few years, I really bleed that resources out, spreading myself thin. So I will take that time machine and I will focus on the 3 things that now I know make a real difference for what I really want to be, to make it as a novelist, as an author, which is write a book, finish it, and ship it, and then start with the next one. All the rest, it's like something you can learn, but you can't possibly be an author without that foundation, which is so simple. You create the product, you make sure it's the best it possibly can, and we discuss about cover, editing, that stuff, you need that. And then ship that. And shipping the product, in this case, can be like pushing the publish button on Amazon. It's hard. And doing it consistently, I think it's super, even more hard than the thought of creating the product. But it needs to be done if you want to make that as your career, as a living. If you want to make a lifestyle out of that. So I would definitely take that time machine. I would go back and have a conversation with myself about these 3 things. The other thing that I now know is that having a platform doesn't necessarily mean spreading yourself thin and being everywhere. What you need really to succeed on a degree on this business is having your website that broadcasts you and your product, and a strong fostered mailing list. A mailing list is something I really never worked on until this podcast, basically. Let's tell the truth, Crystal. Like before that, I really had a couple of mailing lists, but I was more on social media than anything else, because we have that sparkle of energy every single time there's a like and stuff, and that's dangerous because it's keeping you from the things that are important to you, which is, again, create more product, ship them, make sure you have your website and that you have a mailing list of people that are genuinely interested in you. So that's probably the conversation I will have with the past Michele. Then probably the past Michele will do exactly the same mistake, because he and I am stubborn on that regard. But I think we learn from our mistakes a lot. And one thing that I should also say is that I'm working 5 times as hard now because I know of all that time that I wasted, bleeded out. So I've never worked this much on my writing. I've never wrote for like 20 to 25 hours per week, sometimes even more, consistently. For now, it's been 55, 57, 55, 56 weeks, and I'm keeping it to date, and I got the data so I can back that up. So I would say this is definitely one of the things I will do to go back. If I could go back in time, I am curious to know what you will do. I kind of know a couple of things that you will probably do now that I get to know a bit better, but there is no spoiler alert here. I just want you to relate that to the audience. What would you do if you really could, there is this level, you could push it down and you're back?
Yeah, I mean, I'm effectively turning back the clock and starting over at the moment after kind of pausing. I totally focused on nonfiction for the last year and like stockpiling things. So from a sales momentum perspective, I am effectively starting at the beginning again, using all of my smarts this time around. So what I learned and what I am changing is that I would make sure that I had a little bit of water in the tank. We talked about the fire hose approach a few episodes ago, and that is really important to remember. When I started, I really was just putting books out as I was finishing them. I would finish writing it, it would go into the editing pathway, and then it would come back and I would release it. And I was doing that in real time as I went along, which meant I didn't have anything stockpiled, which meant that when life happened, there's a big gap because there was nothing already there to fill that. And it also meant there was a lot of time pressure on everything I was doing because I would set a release date for the next thing. I would be working towards that. There would be editing. There would be all of these things that were very, very time tied and specific. And so I did that to help prevent myself from procrastinating because I am definitely deadline driven and the queen of making things work at the last minute. But I really don't love the constant pressure when it comes to creativity. The businessy organizational side and the productivity management, all of that, it doesn't pair fabulously well with the creative soul who needs space and time to develop ideas and think about things and really just follow the inspiration in those ways. And so I think what happens when you're writing and releasing in real time without any kind of buffer is that you really are being pulled back and forth between your creative self and your business self too much and a little bit too violently. So it's like being caught in a tug of war between two of your personalities who are just fighting over who gets control of your brain. And it doesn't do great things for you, I have to say. It is pretty stressful, and it's really frustrating for readers because you're trying to get the next book out and you can't necessarily give them a firm date because you don't know when it's going to be. So I think if I could go back, I would hold off on the first couple of books until I had the next couple ready. So I would just stockpile a bit more before I started releasing. And the other thing is similar to yours in that once you get a few products out, opportunities start finding you, which is great. But there was an opportunity to be part of a beta program for Find Away Voices and do audiobooks. And with each format of each product that gets produced, it just creates that much more work and that much more stuff to manage. So I had, almost 40 products, which was great and starts generating income, but it's also super distracting and it's a lot to manage by yourself when you're trying to schedule promos and you're juggling everything. And and then the Christmas season sales exploded and it was super exciting and that was fantastic. But wow, is it hard to stay in creative mode when all of that is going on. So I think just decreasing the number of things, as Michele said, that you're trying to manage. I was trying to do all the social media, and with each format you add, that's a different set of Facebook groups you have to be part of. The audiobook world is completely different. So if you're trying to promote to audio listeners, it's all just layers exponentially on top of each other. So it was just too much stuff. And so going back and simplifying and just picking, okay, I'm going to have a BookBub profile, I'm going to have my Amazon author profile, and I'm going to have my newsletter list, and that's really it. And I'm just going to roll from there and keep it really simple. My interactions totally focused on my mailing list with my readers and not so much worrying about all of the other places. So that's what I've been doing over the last couple months, is actually streamlining down and eliminating a lot of the stuff that I had built up, which is really hard to cut it out after you've been doing it for a while, because you feel like you're being irresponsible or whatever. But as you said, the only thing that actually matters is having time and energy to get the stories written, because without them, you have nothing. So I think really focusing on that. And is there anything that I would keep, even though it was a mistake? Yeah, I think it was definitely, and some of that is around cover design and some of the stuff that we're going to talk about in the next episode. So I won't go too deep into that, but I think the biggest mistake that I actually think wasn't a mistake was that I gave myself permission to just focus on the writing for like an 8-month period. And I said, okay, I'm not going to worry about the marketing, and I'm not going to worry about any of the other stuff. I'm just going to write stuff and release it, and then see what people have to say, and then adapt my writing based on the feedback I got from the readers. So even though that's not maybe super strategically smart, and it had negative consequences in terms of not having stuff in the tank to release later, it was really helpful in terms of learning my readers and learning how people were responding to what I was writing. And it let me get good at starting and finishing projects, a whole bunch in a row. So that was really helpful. And I think I would keep that mistake, the writing short, which a lot of people said is not the smartest way to go, because you don't make as much money from page reads, and you develop all your characters in your world, and it's a ton of work, and then your story is just over quickly. And so a lot of people would call that a mistake in terms of a lost opportunity to generate revenue. But for me, that just felt like the right thing to do, because I needed to learn how to do stories from start to finish in a new genre after doing a couple of other genres over the last 15 years. So yeah, it was an interesting experiment. How about you? Is there anything you would keep?
There's actually something I've never said before, so I'm just going to share that. When I published, now the last book was published in 2017, so wow, it's already 3 years. When I published my Omnilogos series in Italian, the 4 science fiction book, guess that I thought that series would make me enough income to live comfortably as a self-published author, which if I think about that now, I just laugh. There were so many mistakes embedded in that presumption. One of the mistakes were, and this is the biggest thing that when I think of that, I feel like myself shaking, because it's so stupid that I really wish this story stops you for doing the same thing that I did, which was my story will be discovered by itself, just like that. And so for years, I just released it and did absolutely nothing to promote it, because I had that belief. I actually believed that if I started promoting it, I would cheat. I would cheat the system in some way, and those books would actually not be worthy. When I didn't see around, and every single person is doing that, not because they're cheating, but because of the nature of the industry. You can have written the best book in this world, but if nobody can see it, nobody's going to read it. And there is something David Gaughran said once, that he compared in one of these YouTube videos this industry to salmons going up and up and up. every single time there are authors that are doing book promotion or releasing new things. So you always go down if you don't release new things, so you don't do something to keep yourself up. I was on the bottom and I didn't even know that. This is super powerful for me, but it's also an eye opener, because you bet I'm never going to do that again. Either I'm studying now advertisements, how to make sure that my product are as polished as possible. I make sure that I'm writing and releasing content with my 12 by 20 challenge on a monthly basis, even something that I never even thought of I could even do. So that's the mistake that I would keep. My presumption that I would be famous just because I published some books. I'm not calling it stupid, but I'm calling it a good lesson that the universe gave me, so that now I can see how flawed that kind of line of reason was. And I don't want you to do the same mistake, because I know your book is out there and maybe you believe it's good and strong, but without your will of making it available to other people, it's very difficult that it's going to be found out. And I think, Crystal, there is so much noise about the few gems that really sparkle and happen almost magically. For example, J.K. Rowling with Harry Potter, we know that it was more of a word of mouth kind of things. But you can point out to more than 5 or 10 of these examples exactly because they are the exception. They are not the rule. They are the exception. They are not the rules. So I would just say the mistake that I made was that. And I feel stupid in telling you that, but at the same time, it's something that I really want to share with you, because I do believe it made me better. And now, thanks to that, the way I approach everything on my publishing business, it has been informed by that flowed way of seeing things, book related wise. And if there is something that I bring with me with this experience, something that I learned that helped me shape what we can call the next phase of my writing career, is this is another thing that I really didn't do before, which is like shut up and listen to people that know more than you. And I'm just trying to surround myself with people that really know a lot about the industry. More than once in these podcasts, I mentioned 3 or 4 different names of people that I follow, and those really help me. People that know more than me and that are at the point that I would like to be, those are really the people, and that you respect, of course. Those are really the people that should inform the way you act. Probably that's the most important thing. Like just listening to what other people in the industry are saying, and never, ever believe that you just have reached the point and you now don't need anything else to grow, because that's death, plain and simple. And I want to know, what's death for you in that regards, Crystal? What are the things that you bring with you from what you've learned?
Well, when I look back over the last 5 years and I look at when things went the best, when, sales ramped up the most, when I was enjoying the process of everything, when I was regularly releasing things, it's interesting that the thing that those periods had in common was that I wasn't focused on the business side, actually. I was reasonably smart about how I was approaching the business side, and I wasn't ignoring it, but I was focused on the writing. And so that, I think, remembering why it's fun, we've talked about this before, that when something becomes your job, you have a very different feeling towards it. And when it no longer is the side hustle or the thing you do when you're not working because you love it so much, and now your income is depending on the choices you make in that field, it really does shift the way that you are approaching things. And so I think for me, what I've learned is that it's okay not to do all the things that people tell you should be doing when you're doing this as a business. You can't ignore all of it, but you can pick a handful of the things that resonate for you and you feel comfortable doing, and there was a few things that really people were saying I should be doing that I wasn't really comfortable with. They just didn't feel like me, and they didn't sit well with my audience. And it was like, yeah, this might be the advice from the experts and from people who are really killing it, which is great. But if I can't feel comfortable doing it, I'm going to not do it. And then it's going to have zero good impact on what's going on. So for me, the biggest thing that I am taking forward is that sense of simplicity, where really first priority is always on the new words. And then the second priority is getting those words out into the world. And the third priority is focusing on advertising and things like that. So, but none of that stuff can happen first. The writing has to happen first. And so I think that's the biggest lesson. And the remembering that it's fun is the next lesson, that it's okay to play a bit in your work. That doesn't mean that you shouldn't get rewarded for it financially just because you're enjoying what you do. It's hard and you can work hard, but it doesn't have to be hard work, if that makes sense. So I think that is key, and what I will be taking with me as we dive into this fall and this exciting release season. I think for both of us, we have some pretty big plans for the next few months. So it will be exciting to keep you all apprised of how that all goes. And now it is time for our curious jar to make an appearance. And I will rifle around in here. You will tell me when to stop.
Go now.
Okay. A yellow one. Okay. Ooh, okay. Here's a good one. Why do you write the kinds of stories that you write?
Okay. Why do you write the kind of stories that you write? Okay. I think I have an answer to this question. Do you mind if I go first? Okay.
Go nuts.
The kind of reading that I've been doing since I can basically remember, it's reading that when I stop at the last page, I'm bringing with something with me. Can be an emotion or something that I'm learning. Usually when I pick up a book, I don't necessarily decide it over to the reviews. So I do decide it by the feeling that I think that book is going to have. And if there is some concept that is embedded in the book that is like profound. Now, profound, it's something that varies. It's different from person to person. But for example, the kind of book I write now are like science fiction, dark fantasy, mythological fantasy. In the past months, I started writing those. Every single time I write some of these stories, if you think about that, even with Lord of Time, there really is not a lot of action, like think exploding and meteorite destroying Earth and like battles, which I could definitely do because like science fiction and fantasy, like amazing starship to destroy each other in the space with the blast of power, gods that can annihilate each other with the blink of an eye. I could use that. Like it's something like you're doing a movie. Why you're not using the special effect? Why you're not using the blast? I usually don't use the blast, at least at this stage of my career in my books. The reviews that I usually got and the feedback that I got is like of a person, okay, I didn't expect this to happen in this book. And some of the reviews and feedbacks are telling me that they did not enjoy the book because of that reason. But I think the reason why I'm writing this kind of book is because I couldn't enjoy writing something that is way different than those. That's the reason why I don't want to say exactly that, but probably I will never really able to write specifically for the market as we intended. If I would be lucky enough, I will create a market for my stories, which I think it's more difficult to do. And I don't even know, now I'm 33, if I can learn that skill of writing for a specific set of people that are enjoying in a specific time frame, a specific genre. Say that 3 times faster with so many specifics. But what I'm doing now is I'm just trying to explore what I can do. And what I write is, I know, dark fantasy, science fiction, mythological fantasy. And that's because I can convey those kind of stories that usually don't imply special effects. And again, that might be a deficiency, that might be something that I'm doing wrong, but that's the only way I know how to do it. So I don't know if that makes any sense for you, but that's basically who I am. That's what I can do with the instrument and tools that I've been given and that I am mastering with my craft. Maybe in 10 years, 20 years, you will see me writing a new, I don't know, Expanse series or something very heavy on the battlefront. I'm not sure. I'm just answering that question that has been given to me now. I kind of know the answer to your question, Krisha. I'm not going to spoil it. At least I know a part of it. But I do want you to share your experience on that regard. Why are you writing the book that you're writing? And this is going to be more difficult because you, as you said more than once, you shifted your focus more than once, like fiction, then non-fiction, romance, children's book. Why at a specific stage of your life you were writing a kind of book and now you are shifting to another? Like, what is keeping you moving?
Well, I would be curious to hear why you think I write the kinds of books I write, because I wonder if it lines up with what I think. But yeah, it is interesting having shifted over time in terms of what I'm focused on. I think when I started writing my official I'm going to be a writer career really started after I finished my master's degree and came home, and my daughter at that point was 8, and so it was nice to write something that she could read, because honestly I had visions of like my grandma and my kid and my mom, reading these romance novels and me being like, no, I can't go into school and talk about the sex scenes I'm writing. That's just not going to fly. So I thought it would be nice to be writing something that she could also kind of be part of. And so that was part of it. Part of it was also just straight up fear, because I had always loved reading romance. I went through phases of reading horror and sci-fi and fantasy. The Robert Jordan book that you talked about at the beginning, that was one of my favorite books. I read it in high school. And then I read, I think 10 or 11 out of I haven't got all the way to the end. I gave up, but I did make it to about book 10 in that cycle. So, I've dabbled in all kinds of different areas, but for me, it comes down to the happy ending part, where I think there's a certain power in believing that things can be okay and that things can have a happy ending. And also just the feeling of reading the books is actually a chemical high. So there's that. There's the whole dopamine hit that you get when you read about those fluttery butterfly moments in a relationship and people taking risks but it turning out okay. It's the same reason people watch so many Hallmark movies at Christmas. It's we need to feel good about things. And so for me, that's part of the fun. And I mean, why do I set them in small towns and why is there a bit of magic? I think that's partly because I come from a small town. I have come from and lived mostly in smaller places for my formative years, we'll say, which is the first, half of my life. And the second half has been spent in cities, but still with that feeling of creating communities. And that's something that I'm really passionate about. So sprinkling in the magic and the intrigue is all that, I used to take a lot of criminology courses and was fascinated with, serial killers and strange scientific experiments that go awry, and the sort of darkness that's in people. I find really interesting to see how that comes out into the world. And so combining that with also the lighter kind of magic and ability of people, usually women, to have a little something extra, whether it's intuition or psychic stuff or an ability to influence the elements or use what nature has, all of those things together is basically just my own kind of belief system. And I write it because I need to read it, and that's what I need to keep myself balanced. And so I think it's selfish as much as generous, in that I first write it for me, And then I share it with other people who get to come play in my world as well. So as far as romance goes, that's why I write that. And I think actually similar with the nonfiction is really, I write that because I figured things out usually the hard way and the expensive way. And I would love if people don't have to go through all of that and they can start, we talk about standing on the shoulders of giants, and if we can start where someone else got to, we can go way further than we could on our own. So for me, that's why I write the nonfiction, is so that I can share what I know and still have time for my own writing, because doing one-on-one coaching with everybody who wants it does not work. It uses up all of the hours in the day. So that just seemed like a smart way to do that. And I do really enjoy writing nonfiction. I've always loved blogging, that I've always been a teacher in some capacity or other. So kind of combining all of the things that I love in one place just makes sense. Now, did that line up with what you thought was going to be the case?
There is a couple of things that I would say you did not mention, but again, it's just my 5 cents. If you want, I can relate it. Yeah, I can relate. Well, you told me a story once, and I think that along with what you said, explain a bit more of the answer. So you have, I think, a fundamental need, not only to connect with people, but to make sure that your story are remembered after you. So in one of the previous episodes, you told me, and you told the audience, that you really were thrilled of the idea that when your pass on, like your story would be there after you, and you're thrilled of the idea that your family, but even a circle of bigger people, enjoy those. And there is something you said that I think you left out, and that I want to bring because I think it's important. And you said, I would love for other people to even expand that and keeping living in these stories, making them alive, because that's the way I can, through your eyes, still be alive and in a way be immortal. And so I think that's something that is defining you, and it's defining me, and it's something that we really want to achieve in a way or in the other. So I'm going to use the word legacy. You want the legacy for your works. And well, I just gave you that because I think that's important that other people know. Maybe you wanted to keep a low profile, but it's something I don't think anybody should be ashamed of. I think it's something that defines you. And I think you shouldn't put it on the side. You should just put it in front of us, and we enjoy that. We want your stories to survive you.
Yeah. So it is. I think we are creating something that's going to live on past us. So that is a very cool reason just to tell stories at all. Is that it is something that will kind of be out there in the world. It takes on a life of its own, which is very cool when the readers step in and own a piece of that world. It's a place where we can connect with everybody else. So that is very cool. We would love to hear your answer to the Curious Jar question, which is, why do you write the kinds of stories that you do? And so you can share that in the comments below this episode, wherever you're watching. And you can also email it to us at ideas@strategicauthorpreneur.com if you like.
And for show notes and links to resources that we mentioned in this episode, and for coupons and discounts on the tool we love, please visit us at strategicauthorpreneur.com.
Be sure to subscribe so you don't miss out on our next episode. We are going to dig into what not to do when it comes to cover design, which is going to be interesting, and you can learn from all of our glorious mistakes that we've made. And we're also going to share what we have learned doing it the hard way, so that you can stand on our shoulders and do better than we did, and right out of the gate getting started. So until then, happy writing, and we'll see you next week.
We'll see you later. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Yeah, I wasn't really very good following rules and stuff like that, so probably that's why I don't read titles or subtitles in this case.
Because you're a rebel.
Yes, rebel.
Yeah. Parents figured out pretty early that the best way to get me to do something was to just let me do it. And that was fine. Some of my first words were all my by self. Like, I'm gonna do it all my by self.
You go.
So that combined with the story from my grandmother, which was that I came to her when I was about 5 and I said, Grandma, do you know what my problem is? And she was like, nothing, darling. Of course you're perfect. And I said, no, my problem is that I'm a procrastinator.
You said that? At 5?
Yeah.
Wow.
And I feel like those two statements basically sum up my personality. I would like to do it all by myself, and I have serious procrastination issues.
Are you shitting me? You get shit done. Why are you saying you're procrastinating?
Sure. I build amazing systems to force myself to do things with external accountability and all kinds of other stuff, but I am the queen of putting things off. Yeah.
Really? That's new. Learning stuff that's new here.
It's not the public side of me, it's the internal part of me. Have you read the Wait But Why comic that's talking about why procrastinators procrastinate?
No.
Best thing ever.
Really?
Yeah, I'll share a link with you after, but you should read it. It is hilarious. It's talking about like the dark playground, and there's this panic monster, and like, oh, it's so funny. The first time Jared gave it to me, I laughed so hard I was like crying in the audience. We were waiting for Michaela's play to start that she had written, and we were sitting there, and Jared's like, I found a thing, it's you. And I was like, oh my God.
Well, thank you for making me part of your inner circle now. I know.
Yeah, now you know the
shit.
truth.
I know
Yeah.
shit. Don't say it to anybody. No.